The storm had been raging for 3 days straight when Elena Vance first saw him. She was not the kind of woman who believed in signs. 6 years in the Army Medical Corps had burned that tendency out of her, replaced it with something harder and more practical. Signs were for people who had the luxury of interpretation. Elena dealt in facts: wounds that needed closing, bones that needed setting, bodies that needed saving, or, when saving was no longer possible, bodies that needed to be let go with whatever dignity remained. The cabin in Blackwater Valley had been her project for almost 3 years now. Every nail she hammered, every board she replaced, every pipe she soldered was a small victory against the emptiness that had taken up residence in her chest since Marcus died. Her hands needed work. Her mind needed occupation. The alternative was thinking, and thinking led to remembering, and remembering led to that dark place she had crawled out of once and never intended to visit again. Tonight, the motion sensors she had installed along the property perimeter were screaming. Elena pulled on her boots without bothering to lace them properly. She grabbed the shotgun from its mount beside the door, checked the chamber out of habit, and stepped onto the porch. Rain lashed against her face immediately, cold and sharp as needles. The security light she had rigged to the sensors cast a pale cone of illumination into the darkness, revealing nothing but sheets of water and the writhing shadows of pine trees. Probably a deer, maybe a black bear, though they usually avoided the cabin. She had made sure of that during her first winter here, when a particularly bold sow had taken an interest in her garbage bins. A few rubber bullets and a lot of noise had established the necessary boundaries. But something felt different tonight. Elena could not have explained it in any rational terms. Just a prickling at the back of her neck, a weight in her stomach that had nothing to do with the cold dinner she had eaten hours ago. She descended the porch steps, shotgun raised, and followed the beam of her flashlight toward the northern tree line where the sensors had triggered. The rain made it hard to see more than 10 feet ahead. She moved carefully, placing each foot with deliberate precision on ground that had turned to mud. The forest loomed before her, a wall of black punctuated by the silver flash of raindrops. And then she saw him. At first, her mind refused to process what her eyes were showing her. The shape was too large, too wrong. It lay at the edge of the clearing where her property met the wild, a heap of something dark and glistening that seemed to pulse with each flash of distant lightning. Elena approached with her weapon ready, finger alongside the trigger guard. The flashlight beam swept across the shape and found fur. Black fur, matted with rain and something darker. Blood. A lot of blood. A wolf, but not like any wolf she had ever seen. The creature was massive. Lying on its side, it still came up past her knee. Its body stretched longer than she was tall, all lean muscle and heavy bone wrapped in that midnight coat. The proportions were wrong for a normal wolf. The skull was broader, the muzzle longer, the paws like dinner plates. And the eyes were open, staring blindly at nothing. They were white, not the white of cataracts or infection. A pure, milky white that seemed almost to glow in the flashlight beam. Unseeing. Empty. Elena's training kicked in before her fear could take hold. She knelt in the mud beside the creature, keeping her weapon within reach but freeing her hands to assess. The body was warm. Steam rose from it into the cold air. Alive then. Barely. Her fingers found the wounds and her breath caught in her throat. These were not the marks of animal attack. No teeth had made these cuts. No claws had left these precise, parallel lines across the creature's ribs. These were knife wounds, deliberate, methodical. Someone had taken their time with this animal. And the scarring around its eyes. Fresh, angry red tissue that spoke of recent trauma, not natural blindness. Someone had done this. Someone had blinded this creature on purpose. Elena sat back on her heels, rain streaming down her face, and looked at the wolf that should not exist. Every rational part of her mind screamed to call animal control, to back away slowly and let the professionals handle whatever this was, to not get involved. But another part of her, the part that had held dying soldiers in field hospitals and promised them they would be okay even when she knew they would not. That part looked at this broken creature and saw something familiar, something that resonated with the fractures in her own soul. She thought of Marcus in his final days, the way the light had slowly faded from his eyes, the way everyone had stepped back, had given him space, had let him slip away because it was easier than fighting. No one had fought for him, not hard enough, not when it mattered. The wolf's chest rose and fell with shallow, labored breaths. Its tongue lolled in the mud. It was dying, and it was dying alone, and Elena Vance had spent 3 years running from death, only to find it waiting for her at the edge of her property in the form of a creature that should not exist. She made her decision. Getting the wolf onto the tarp took the better part of an hour. He was heavy, far heavier than his emaciated frame suggested, and every movement made him whimper in a way that tore at something deep inside her chest. She talked to him while she worked, nonsense mostly. The same tone she had used with wounded soldiers who did not speak English, who could not understand her words, but could hear the calm in her voice and take some small comfort from it. "It is going to be okay. I am not going to hurt you. Easy now. Easy." The shed was closer than the cabin, and she was not foolish enough to bring an unknown predator into her living space, no matter how pitiful it looked. She dragged the tarp through the mud, inch by agonizing inch, until she finally got him through the shed door and onto the pile of old blankets she had hastily arranged in the corner. Only then, in the dim light of the single bulb overhead, did she get a true look at what she was dealing with. The wounds were worse than she had thought. Cuts and burns and something that looked almost like brands on his flanks. His ribs showed through his coat like the bars of a cage. Whatever had happened to him, it had been sustained and systematic. Torture. There was no other word for it. Elena worked through the night. She cleaned wounds with antiseptic that made the creature growl weakly, but never snap. She stitched the deepest cuts with the suture kit she kept for emergencies. She administered broad-spectrum antibiotics from her veterinary supplies, guessing at the dosage based on weight and hoping she was not killing him faster than his injuries were. By the time the first gray light of dawn began to seep through the shed's single window, she had done everything she could. The wolf lay still on his makeshift bed, breathing more evenly now, those terrible white eyes closed in something that might have been sleep. Elena sat on an overturned bucket across from him, covered in mud and blood and rain, and watched him breathe. "What are you?" she whispered to the silent shed. "What happened to you?" No answer came. She had not expected one. She returned to the cabin only long enough to shower and change into dry clothes. Sleep was out of the question. Her mind was running too fast, cataloging observations and generating questions she had no way to answer. The wolf was too large, the wounds were too deliberate, the blindness was too precise. None of it made sense. And Elena had learned long ago that when something did not make sense, it usually meant you were missing critical information. She spent the morning researching on her laptop, using the satellite internet connection that was her one concession to modern life out here in the wilderness. She searched for reports of wolf attacks in the area, for news of exotic animals escaped from private collections, for any explanation that would make the creature in her shed fit into the world as she understood it. Nothing. Around noon, she remembered she needed supplies anyway. The trip to town would give her a chance to ask around, to see if anyone else had noticed anything strange in the valley. The drive to Millbrook took 40 minutes on roads that the storm had turned into rivers of mud. The town itself was barely worthy of the name. A general store, a gas station, a diner that served acceptable coffee and mediocre pie. Elena had made a point of keeping her interactions with the locals to a minimum. She was not unfriendly exactly, just private. The people of Millbrook had learned to respect that. The general store was quiet when she entered. Old Bill Watson was behind the counter as always, reading a fishing magazine and looking like he had been there since the dawn of time. He nodded at Elena as she grabbed a basket and started collecting the items on her mental list. She was reaching for a bag of dog food, the largest one they had, when she noticed the 2 men at the end of the aisle. They were not from around here. That much was immediately obvious. Their clothes were expensive. Technical gear designed for outdoor work, but showing none of the wear that would come from actual use. Their boots were clean, too clean for anyone who had been walking these woods in a 3-day storm. Elena kept her face neutral as she continued shopping, but her peripheral vision tracked their every move. One of them was young, maybe 30, with a military bearing that she recognized instantly. The other was older, heavier, with the look of someone who gave orders rather than followed them. They were talking to Bill at the counter now, asking questions. Elena drifted closer, pretending to examine a display of flashlight batteries. "Looking for an animal," the older man was saying. "Large, might be injured. Seen anything like that around here?" Bill shook his head slowly in that way he had. "Lot of animals in these woods," he said. "What kind we talking about?" A wolf. The younger man this time, impatient. Big one, black fur. Would have come through in the last few days. Elena felt her pulse quicken but kept her expression blank. She selected a pack of batteries and moved toward the counter, positioning herself behind the two strangers as if waiting her turn. Bill's eyes flicked to her for just a moment. "Cannot say I have seen anything like that," he said to the men, "but you might check with the ranger station up the highway. They keep track of wildlife sightings." The older man nodded, clearly dissatisfied with this answer, but not willing to press further. He dropped a business card on the counter. "If you hear anything," he said, "there is a reward. Significant." Elena watched them leave, watched them climb into a black SUV that was far too new and far too clean for this part of the country. She waited until they had pulled out of the parking lot before approaching the counter. "Friends of yours?" Bill asked mildly. "Never seen them before." Elena set her items down. "What do you think they really want with that wolf?" Bill's weathered face revealed nothing. "Some folks collect exotic animals," he said. "Others just like to hunt things that are hard to find. Either way, probably best if that wolf stays lost." Elena paid for her supplies in cash and drove back to the cabin with her eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror. The SUV did not appear, but she could not shake the feeling that she was being watched. The wolf was awake when she returned to the shed. She knew immediately that something had changed. He was lying in the same position she had left him, but his head was raised now, those white eyes tracking the sound of her footsteps with an intensity that made her hesitate at the door. "Easy," she said softly. "It is just me." A low growl rumbled in his chest. Not aggressive, she thought, afraid, the sound of a creature that expected pain and was bracing itself for impact. Elena moved slowly, deliberately, setting down the bag of supplies and lowering herself to sit cross-legged on the floor several feet away from him. She had learned this technique with traumatized patients. Do not tower over them. Do not approach directly. Make yourself small and still and wait. The growl faded. The wolf's head lowered slightly, though his ears remained pricked forward. "I brought you food," Elena said, keeping her voice low and even. "Going to need to get some strength back if you want to heal. I am going to open the bag now, not going to come any closer until you are ready." She opened the dog food and poured some into a metal bowl she had brought for this purpose. The wolf's nostrils flared. Hungry. Of course he was hungry. God only knew when he had last eaten. Elena slid the bowl forward across the concrete floor, using a long piece of wood to push it within his reach without entering his space. He hesitated, that massive head swinging toward the sound of the bowl scraping against the floor. Then slowly, painfully, he dragged himself forward and began to eat. She watched him in silence, cataloging observations. His movements were more coordinated than she would have expected from a creature so severely injured. The blindness did not seem to disorient him as much as it should have. And the wounds. She had been checking them every few hours. They were healing too fast. When the bowl was empty, the wolf lay back down with a heavy sigh. His eyes found her direction again, those milky white orbs staring through her rather than at her. Elena made a decision. "I know you are not just a wolf," she said quietly. "I do not know what you are. But I know you did not get those wounds from any animal, and I know those men in town are looking for you, and I know that healing that fast is not normal for any creature I have ever encountered." The wolf went very still. "I am not going to turn you in," Elena continued. "I am not going to hurt you, but I need to understand what I have gotten myself into here. So when you are ready, if you can, I need you to give me something, some sign that you understand what I'm saying." For a long moment, nothing happened. The wolf lay motionless, those blind eyes fixed on her. Elena began to wonder if she was losing her mind, talking to an animal like it could understand her. Then the wolf moved. He lifted one massive paw and brought it down against the floor. Once, twice, 3 times. Elena's heart stopped. "3," she whispered. "Can you do that again?" 3 more impacts, deliberate, unmistakable. "Oh my God," Elena breathed. Her hands were shaking. Her entire worldview was crumbling around her. "Oh my God, you understand me." The wolf dipped his head in what could only be interpreted as a nod. Elena did not sleep that night either. She sat in the shed with the creature, her shotgun across her lap more out of habit than any real fear. She talked to him for hours, establishing a rudimentary communication system. 1 tap for yes, 2 for no, 3 for I do not know or cannot answer. She learned that he had been held captive, that his captors had blinded him deliberately, that there were others like him, though he could not or would not explain what that meant. She learned that the men in town were connected to his captors, that they would not stop looking. And she learned that he was healing, that every hour his strength was returning in ways that defied everything she knew about biology. "What are you?" she asked finally, as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky outside. The wolf was silent for a long moment. Then he opened his mouth, and Elena's world changed forever. The voice that emerged was rough, broken, like someone who had not spoken in a very long time and was remembering how the pieces fit together. "Not just wolf." Elena's hand flew to her mouth. The shotgun clattered to the floor. She scrambled backward, her back hitting the wall of the shed, her eyes wide with a fear that was rapidly transforming into something else. Wonder, disbelief, the vertigo of encountering something impossible. The wolf made a sound that might have been a laugh, though it came out more like a cough. "Afraid now?" "No," Elena said, and was surprised to find that it was true. She was not afraid. Shocked, yes. Confused, absolutely. But not afraid. No, just, I need you to explain everything. Long story. We have time. And so, in halting words that grew more fluid as the hours passed, the creature that was not just a wolf began to tell his story. His name was Kael Thornwood. He was 243 years old, though he looked no older than a man in his prime. He was what his kind called a shifter, a being that existed between two forms, human and wolf, belonging fully to neither world. He spoke of his people, a pack of 18 souls hidden in a valley deep in the mountains, where they had lived in secret for 3 centuries. He spoke of the hunters who had pursued them across generations, human families that passed down the knowledge of their existence like a poisoned inheritance. And he spoke of his capture, of the torture designed to break him, of the ritual that had stolen his sight and severed his connection to his pack. Elena listened without interrupting. Some part of her mind was screaming that this was insane, that she was having a breakdown, that none of this could possibly be real. But a larger part of her, the part that had seen too much of the world's darkness to dismiss anything as impossible, simply absorbed the information and began to plan. When he finished, she sat in silence for a long time. "Why are you healing?" she finally asked. "You said the blindness was supposed to be permanent. A curse, you called it. So why are your eyes changing?" She had noticed it over the past few days. The pure white was giving way to something else, hints of gold around the edges of his irises, color returning where color should not exist. Kael's massive head turned toward her, those changing eyes seeking her face even though they could not see it. "I do not know," he admitted. "The curse was crafted by powerful magic. It should not be breakable, not without." He stopped, hesitated. His nose twitched, testing the air between them. "Without what?" "Without something the casters did not account for," he said slowly. "Something rare, something that should not exist anymore." Elena felt the weight of the silver locket against her chest. She had worn it every day since her grandmother died 5 years ago. An old piece of jewelry that Vera Kincaid had given her on her deathbed, with words that had seemed like the ramblings of a dying mind. "When the boundary grows thin, you will know what to do." She pulled the locket out from under her shirt. Kael's nostrils flared. "What is that?" His voice had changed, sharper now, urgent. "A necklace. My grandmother left it to me." "Bring it closer." Elena hesitated only a moment before crossing the distance between them. She knelt beside the wolf, closer than she had ever dared, and held the locket where he could smell it. The sound he made was not quite a word. It was something older, more primal, a vocalization that seemed to bypass language entirely and strike directly at something deep in her spine. "Guardian," he breathed. "Your grandmother was a guardian." "I do not know what that means." Kael's blind eyes found her face with uncanny accuracy. "It means," he said, "that you are not here by accident. And it means that everything just got a lot more complicated." The third night brought fire. Elena was asleep on the cot she had set up in the shed, her shotgun within arm's reach, when the smell of smoke dragged her into consciousness. She was on her feet in seconds, military training overriding the fog of exhaustion. The northern wall of the shed was burning. Kael was already awake, already struggling to his feet on legs that shook with the effort. His eyes, she noticed in the dancing light of the flames, were almost entirely gold now, still clouded, still not fully functional, but changing rapidly. "They found us," he snarled. Elena grabbed her weapon and kicked open the shed door. The rain had stopped sometime during the night, and the world outside was painted in shades of orange and black. Figures moved in the tree line. 3 of them, maybe 4. She fired twice into the darkness, not aiming to hit, but to create space. Return fire cracked past her head, close enough to feel the air displacement. These men were armed, trained, serious. "Back door," Elena shouted. "Now!" She had built the shed herself. She knew every weakness, every gap in the structure. The back wall had a section of removable panels, designed for exactly this kind of situation. Because Elena Vance had learned long ago that the only thing more important than being able to get into a place was being able to get out. Kael moved better than she expected. Faster. The past few days of rest and food had done more for him than should have been possible. He followed her through the panels and into the forest beyond. They ran. Or rather, Elena ran while Kael loped alongside her, his massive form moving through the undergrowth with a silence that seemed impossible for something his size. The fire was spreading behind them, consuming the shed and everything in it. Her supplies, her equipment. 3 years of careful preparation gone in minutes. She would mourn later. Right now, survival was the only priority. The cabin appeared through the trees, dark and quiet. Elena hesitated at the edge of the clearing. If they had found the shed, they might have found the cabin too. "Wait here," she breathed. Kael's nose twitched. 2 inside. Fresh scent. An hour. Maybe less. Elena processed this information with a cold efficiency that would have surprised anyone who knew her as the quiet woman who fixed up old cabins and kept to herself. She had learned this in the desert. The ability to shut down everything except the immediate tactical problem. "Back door or front?" she asked. Kael considered. "Back. 1 there. Weaker position. The other will come when he hears noise." "Can you take him?" "The one at the back." The wolf bared his teeth in something that was not quite a smile. "I am blind, not helpless." They moved in tandem, years of different kinds of training merging into unexpected synchronization. Elena circled to the front while Kael melted into the shadows beside the back door. She counted to 30. Then she kicked in the front door and dropped to 1 knee, shotgun already tracking. The man inside was fast. He had his weapon up and firing before she finished entering the room. But Elena had been shot at by better marksmen in worse conditions. She rolled behind the overturned couch, felt splinters from the wooden frame peppering her shoulder, and returned fire. The boom of the shotgun in the enclosed space was deafening. Her target went down with a scream, clutching his leg where the buckshot had torn through muscle and bone. From the back of the cabin came another scream, shorter, wetter, then silence. Elena rose slowly, keeping her weapon trained on the downed intruder. He was young, mid-20s at most. The pain and fear in his eyes made him look even younger. "The second man is dead," Kael said from the doorway. His muzzle was dark with blood. His eyes, she noticed, were almost completely gold now, brighter than they had been minutes ago. The wounded man looked at the wolf and began to laugh, a high, desperate sound that bordered on hysteria. "Thornwood," he gasped. "They said you were blind. They said you were broken." "I was," Kael replied. "Things change." The man's eyes found Elena. "And who is this? Your little human helper. Do you know what you have gotten yourself into, woman? Do you know what he is?" Elena did not answer. She crossed the room in 3 quick strides and pressed the barrel of her shotgun against the man's chest. "Who sent you?" she said. Her voice was calm, conversational. The voice of someone who had asked hard questions in hard situations before and was fully prepared to accept the consequences of the answers. The man's laughter died. He looked into her eyes and saw something there that made his face go pale. "Blackwood," he whispered. "Colonel Silas Blackwood." Elena felt Kael stiffen beside her. "Why?" she pressed. "What does he want with Kael?" "He wants them all dead." The man's voice was fading, blood loss pulling him toward unconsciousness. "Every last one of them. Has for years. His family has been hunting them for 7 generations." "And me?" Elena asked. "What does he want with me?" The man's eyes flickered. "You. He did not know about you. But he will now. And when he finds out what you are." "What I am," Elena repeated. "What am I?" But the man's eyes had rolled back in his head, unconscious, maybe dying. She did not particularly care which. Kael approached, his gold eyes fixed on the silver locket that had slipped free during the fight. He leaned close, inhaling deeply. "Guardian?" he said again. The word seemed to cost him something. "Your grandmother was a guardian, one of the last. They were supposed to be extinct." "You keep saying that word like it is supposed to mean something to me." "Guardians were the bridge between our worlds." Kael's voice was soft, reverent. For centuries they maintained the balance, kept the peace. When the hunters began their purge, they targeted the guardians first. Without them, we had no advocates, no protectors who could move between both worlds. Elena looked down at the locket in her hand. It suddenly felt heavier than it should. "And now," she said slowly, "you think I am one of them." Kael met her eyes, gold on brown, wolf on human, two creatures that should not have been standing in the same room, speaking the same language, fighting the same fight. "I think," he said carefully, "that the curse that was supposed to destroy me is breaking. I think that wounds that should have killed me are healing. And I think that all of this started happening the moment you found me in the rain." Elena closed her fist around the locket. "My grandmother left me a note," she said, "in the locket. I never understood what it meant." "What did it say?" Elena opened the silver casing with fingers that trembled only slightly. Inside, pressed against a faded photograph of a young Vera Kincaid, was a scrap of paper covered in spidery handwriting. She read the words aloud, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "When the boundary grows thin, you will know what to do. The broken will find you, the blind will see, and in the choosing, not the fate, you will find what you were always meant to be." Kael was silent for a long moment. "Guardians were not born," he finally said. "They were chosen, by something older than my kind, older than humans, chosen for their capacity to stand between worlds." Elena looked at the unconscious man on her floor, at the blood on Kael's muzzle, at the burning shed visible through her shattered window. "Well," she said, "I guess something just made its choice." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and revelation. Kael's sight returned fully by the end of the first week. Golden eyes that could see clearly for the first time in months, that could track movement and perceive detail with precision that exceeded even human capability. With his vision came his strength. The emaciated creature she had dragged out of the mud transformed into something powerful and dangerous and magnificent. And with his recovery came the truth about her husband. They were sitting on her porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains, when Kael asked about the photograph she kept on her nightstand, the one of her and Marcus on their wedding day. "He died 3 years ago," Elena said. "Cancer, 4 months from diagnosis to funeral." Kael was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked her to describe the symptoms. Elena did. The sudden weakness, the bruising that appeared without cause, the way his body seemed to reject every treatment the doctors tried, the speed of the decline that had shocked even the oncologists. "That was not cancer," Kael said when she finished. "What?" He turned to look at her, golden eyes filled with something that might have been sorrow. "Those symptoms, they match silver poisoning. It is how the hunters kill people who carry shifter genes without manifesting the ability to shift. It is slow, untraceable by human medicine, and it is always fatal." Elena felt the world tilt beneath her. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that your husband was not sick. He was murdered. By the same people who tortured me. By the same people who have been hunting my kind for 7 generations. The grief she had carried for 3 years transformed in that moment into something colder and sharper, something that had teeth. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would they kill him? He was not like you. He was just a man." "The gene does not always express," Kael explained gently. "Some people carry it their whole lives without ever knowing. But Blackwood keeps records, family trees going back centuries. If your husband's line showed any trace of shifter blood, no matter how diluted." Elena stood abruptly. Her hands were shaking. Her vision had narrowed to a single point of white-hot focus. "Then this is my fight too," she said. "Not just because I am helping you, not just because of my grandmother. They took everything from me, and they are going to answer for it." Kael rose to stand beside her. In his eyes, she saw understanding, recognition. 2 broken souls standing at the edge of something neither fully understood, bound together by loss and healing and the slow building of trust that had nothing to do with fate and everything to do with choice. "They will answer," he agreed. "Together we will make sure of it." Elena looked out into the darkening forest, at the mountains where Kael's pack waited in hidden valleys, at the world that had seemed so empty 3 weeks ago and now felt terrifyingly full. "Tell me about Wolf Haven," she said. "Tell me about your people. Tell me everything I need to know." And Kael did. As the moon rose over Blackwater Valley, he told her about the pack, about Ronan, the alpha who had led them for over a century, about Lyra the Tracker and Finn the youngest, About his mother, Elder Mira, who remembered the time when guardians walked freely among both worlds, and about Sarah, his little sister, who had been captured 6 months ago while searching for him after his disappearance. "We have to go back," Elena said when he finished. "We have to help them." Kael nodded slowly. His golden eyes met hers, and in that moment, something passed between them. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of love, the foundation upon which love might someday be built. "We do," he agreed, "but not alone, and not unprepared. There is much you need to learn about who you are and what you can do, and there is much I need to remember about who I was before they broke me." Elena reached out and touched his face. It was the first time she had touched him deliberately, not for medical necessity, but simply because she wanted to. His skin was warm beneath her fingers. "Then we learn together," she said, "and when we are ready, we fight together." Kael leaned into her touch just slightly, a gesture of trust from a creature that had every reason never to trust again. "Together," he echoed. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines. The moon cast silver light across a world that was no longer what it seemed. And two souls that had been broken by loss stood together in the darkness, choosing each other, choosing the fight, choosing a future that neither could have imagined 3 weeks ago when one was dying in the mud and the other was just trying to survive another day. This was how it began. Not with fate, not with destiny, not with mystical forces pulling them toward an inevitable conclusion. It began with a choice, with a hand reaching out in the rain, with the decision to help a broken creature when walking away would have been so much easier. It began with blood and mud and the stubborn refusal to let death win. And it was only the beginning. The fire in the shed had burned itself out by morning, leaving nothing but charred timbers and ash. Elena stood at the edge of the destruction, cataloging what she had lost. Supplies, equipment, the careful preparations of 3 years, all gone in a single night. But standing beside her was something she had gained. Something she could not have anticipated when she drove up that muddy road 3 years ago seeking only solitude and silence. Kael watched her survey the damage, his golden eyes reflecting the weak morning light. In his human form, which she had finally witnessed the previous night, he was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell past his collar and features that seemed carved from weathered stone. There was gray at his temples, despite his apparent youth, and lines around his eyes that spoke of centuries of living. "You could leave," he said quietly. "This fight is not yours. Not truly. You could disappear, start over somewhere else. Blackwood does not know your face yet." Elena considered the offer. She thought about the life she had been living, the empty days, the quiet nights, the way she had been existing without truly living, going through motions that had lost all meaning. Then she thought about Marcus, about the truth of his death, about the 3 years she had spent believing it was cancer, believing it was fate, believing there was nothing she could have done. She thought about her grandmother, about the locket, about the words that had seemed like nonsense until they suddenly made perfect, terrible sense. When the boundary grows thin, you will know what to do. The boundary had grown thin, and Elena knew what she had to do. "My grandmother prepared me for this," she said, "even if I did not understand it at the time. And those men, they took my husband from me. They took 3 years of grieving for a lie." She turned to face Kael directly. "So no, I am not leaving. I am not starting over. I am seeing this through, even if it kills you." Elena almost laughed. There were worse things than dying. She had learned that in the desert, holding the hands of soldiers who were not afraid of death, but terrified of being forgotten. She had learned it again watching Marcus fade away, watching the light leave his eyes while she sat helpless beside his bed. "Everybody dies," she said. "The question is whether you do anything worth a damn before it happens." Kael studied her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a recognition. "You are not what I expected," he admitted. "What did you expect? Someone who would run, someone who would deny what they were seeing, someone who would choose the safe path." Elena kicked at a piece of charred wood, watching it crumble into ash. "I stopped taking safe paths the day I enlisted," she said. 22 years old and fresh out of nursing school, signing up for a war I barely understood because it felt like the right thing to do. She shook her head. "Safe paths are for people who have something to lose. I lost everything that mattered 3 years ago. What is left to protect?" Kael was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. "Maybe that is why you found me. Not fate, not destiny, just two people who had nothing left to lose finding each other in the rain. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, past the supernatural nature of his existence, past the impossibility of his healing and his transformation, past the centuries that separated their lived experiences. She saw a man who had been broken, who had been tortured and blinded and left for dead, who had every reason to give up and had chosen to keep fighting instead. She saw herself. Maybe, she agreed. Or maybe it does not matter why. Maybe all that matters is what we do next. What do you want to do next? Elena turned back toward the cabin. There was work to be done, supplies to gather, plans to make, a pack to find and a sister to rescue, and a man named Blackwood who had a great deal to answer for. I want to learn, she said, everything you can teach me about your world, about what I am, about what I can do, and then I want to make them pay. Kael fell into step beside her, two figures walking through the gray morning light toward an uncertain future. That, he said, sounds like a plan. Behind them, the ruins of the shed continued to smolder. Ahead of them lay mountains and forests and secrets older than human memory. And somewhere in the distance, hidden in valleys that no map had ever charted, a pack of wolves waited for their lost brother to return. Elena did not know what she would find there. She did not know if she was truly a guardian or just a woman who had stumbled into something far bigger than herself. She did not know if she could save Sarah or stop Blackwood or survive whatever was coming. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was done running from death, done hiding from pain, done existing in the gray spaces between living and dying. Whatever came next, she would face it standing. The boundary had grown thin, and Elena Vance was ready to cross it. The days that followed the attack settled into a rhythm that Elena had not experienced since her time in the service. Wake before dawn, train, eat, train more, sleep when the body demanded it, repeat. Kael was a patient teacher, which surprised her. She had expected someone who had lived for nearly 2.5 centuries to be impatient with human limitations, to grow frustrated with how slowly she learned. Instead, he met her where she was and built from there. They started with the basics: how to recognize shifter tracks versus ordinary wolf prints, how to identify the scent markers that packs use to establish territory, how to read the subtle signs in the forest that indicated whether the wildlife was behaving normally or had been disturbed by something unnatural passing through. Elena absorbed it all with the same methodical intensity she had applied to learning combat medicine. Take in the information, process it, practice until it becomes instinct. Her military training had given her a framework for rapid skill acquisition that translated surprisingly well to learning the ways of a world she had not known existed a month ago. But the physical training was only part of it. On the 5th day after the attack, Kael asked to see the locket again. They were sitting on the cabin porch in the gray light of early morning. The forest was quiet around them, that peculiar stillness that comes just before the birds wake. Elena had learned to appreciate these moments. They reminded her of the desert before dawn, when the world held its breath and everything felt possible. She pulled the chain over her head and handed him the silver pendant. He held it carefully, turning it over in hands that were still learning to be human again after weeks trapped in wolf form. Your grandmother never told you what this was, he said. It was not quite a question. She told me stories. Elena watched his fingers trace the symbols etched into the metal. Stories about people who could walk between worlds, who kept the peace between things that should not exist together. I thought they were fairy tales. They were history. Kael opened the locket, studying the faded photograph inside. The woman in this picture, she looks like you. That is her, Vera Kincaid. She raised me after my parents died. Kael was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. How did she die? Elena had not spoken about this, not to anyone. The words felt heavy in her throat, reluctant to emerge. In her sleep, she finally said, 5 years ago, she was 93. The doctor said her heart just stopped. She paused, remembering. But she knew it was coming. The last week, she was different. Calmer, like she was getting ready for a long trip. Did she say anything? At the end. Elena closed her eyes. The memory was vivid despite the years. Her grandmother's bedroom, filled with the smell of lavender and old books. The papery skin of Vera's hands clasped around her own. The clarity in those faded blue eyes that had seemed so out of place in a body that was failing. She said the boundary was thinning, that something was coming, and I needed to be ready. She gave me the locket and told me to keep it close, to never take it off. Elena opened her eyes and found Kael watching her intently. She said one more thing, Elena continued. She said that when the time came, I would know what to do, that it was in my blood. Kael handed the locket back to her. Their fingers brushed in the transfer, and Elena felt something. A spark, a pulse, like touching a live wire but without the pain. "What was that?" she asked, pulling her hand back reflexively. "The bond," Kael said. He did not seem surprised. "Between guardian and shifter. Your grandmother would have felt it too, with those she protected." Elena looked down at the locket in her palm. The metal was warm, warmer than it should have been from just body heat. "What exactly is a guardian?" she asked. "Not the stories, the reality." Kael leaned back against the porch railing, his golden eyes distant. "No one knows exactly where they came from," he began. "Some of our elders believe they were human once, chosen by whatever force created both our kinds. Others think they were always something in between, neither fully human nor fully shifter, but something that could understand both. And what did they do? They maintained the balance." Kael's voice took on the cadence of someone reciting ancient history. "When conflicts arose between our peoples, guardians served as mediators. They could sense truth from lies, could feel the intentions behind words. They were respected by both sides because they owed allegiance to neither." "What happened to them?" "The hunters happened." Kael's jaw tightened. Blackwood's ancestors and others like them. They realized that without the guardians, we would have no advocates in the human world, no one to speak for us, so they targeted them first, systematically, over generations. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "My grandmother survived," she said. "Your grandmother hid. There is no shame in that. It was the only way to survive. She buried her abilities, lived as a normal human, and passed the legacy to you in secret. But I do not have any abilities. I cannot sense truth or feel intentions. I am just." Elena stopped. She was about to say ordinary, but the word felt wrong now. Everything felt wrong now. Kael shook his head slowly. "The abilities are there. They have been there all along. You just never had reason to notice them." "What do you mean? How did you know not to trust those men in town? The ones looking for me?" Elena frowned. "I do not know. They just felt wrong." "And the night of the attack, how did you know to check the shed instead of going back to sleep?" "The motion sensors, they went off but they had gone off before. You told me. Animals trigger them sometimes. Why did you grab your shotgun and investigate that particular night?" Elena opened her mouth to answer and found she did not have one. The truth was, she had simply known that something was different, known that she needed to act. "Oh," she said quietly. "The abilities are there," Kael repeated. "They have just been sleeping, waiting for something to wake them up." Elena looked out in the forest, seeing it differently now. The trees were not just trees. The shadows were not just shadows. Everything seemed to hum with a frequency she was only beginning to perceive. "What woke them?" she asked. Kael did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was careful. "I do not know for certain, but I have a theory." "Tell me." He turned to face her fully. "The curse that blinded me was powerful. Ancient magic, fueled by blood sacrifice. It should have been permanent. Nothing should have been able to break it. But something did. You did." Kael held her gaze. "From the moment you touched me, I could feel the curse weakening. Every time you spoke to me, every time you came near, it faded a little more. Whatever power your grandmother passed to you, it is strong enough to unravel magic that should be unbreakable." Elena absorbed this in silence. The implications were staggering. If she could break curses just by being near, what else could she do? What else might be sleeping inside her, waiting to be discovered? "The locket," she said suddenly. "You keep looking at it like it means something more than just a family heirloom." "Because it does." Kael reached out but stopped short of touching it. "That symbol on the cover, the 3 interlocking circles, it is the mark of the conduit." "The conduit, the rarest form of guardian. Most guardians could sense and mediate. Conduits could do more. They could amplify or suppress supernatural energy. They could strengthen a shifter's abilities or completely neutralize them. They could heal wounds that should be fatal or break curses that should be permanent," Elena finished. "Yes." The weight of this revelation settled over her like a physical thing. A week ago, she had been a woman alone in the woods, trying to outrun her grief. Now she was apparently the last of an ancient lineage with powers she did not understand. "No pressure," she muttered. To her surprise, Kael laughed. It was a rough sound, unpracticed but genuine. "I like that about you," he said. "The world reveals itself to be vastly stranger than you thought, and your response is sarcasm. Would you prefer I panic?" Honestly, a little panic might be appropriate. Elena almost smiled. Almost. But the moment was interrupted by a sound from the forest. A bird taking flight suddenly, its cry sharp with alarm. They both went still. "Something is coming," Kael said. He was already shifting, his human form blurring and reforming in that unsettling way that Elena still had not gotten used to watching. 2 legs became 4, hands became paws. The man disappeared, and the wolf emerged, massive and black and alert. Elena grabbed her shotgun from where it leaned against the porch railing. Her eyes scanned the tree line, looking for movement. Seconds passed, then minutes. The forest remained silent. Then Kael relaxed, his ears swiveling forward with interest rather than alarm. "Pack," he said, the words slightly distorted by his wolf mouth. "Mine. Coming." From the shadows of the pines, 3 shapes emerged. Wolves. But not like Kael had been when she found him. These were healthy, powerful, moving with the confidence of apex predators in their natural environment. One was silver gray with a scarred muzzle, clearly the oldest. One was a deep russet color, smaller but with an intensity in her gaze that suggested speed and cunning. The third was young, barely more than a pup by wolf standards, his coat a mottled gray and black. Elena kept her weapon ready but did not raise it. These were Kael's people, his family. The gray wolf stopped at the edge of the clearing. His eyes, a pale amber that seemed almost white in the morning light, fixed on Kael with an expression that Elena could only describe as complicated. Then he spoke. 50 years. The voice was deeper than Kael's, rougher, with the weight of centuries behind it. Kael dipped his head in what might have been acknowledgement or shame. "Ronan, 50 years without a word. We thought you were dead, your mother thought you were dead, and now you return with a human." The emphasis on the last word was not quite contempt, but it was close. Elena stepped forward before Kael could respond. "This human saved his life," she said. Her voice was steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. She was standing before creatures that could tear her apart in seconds, armed with nothing but a shotgun and whatever nascent abilities she might or might not possess. And this human is apparently the last guardian your kind will ever see. So maybe we could skip the posturing and have an actual conversation. Silence fell over the clearing. The russet wolf made a sound that might have been a laugh. The young one's ears perked forward with obvious interest. Even Ronan seemed taken aback, his massive head tilting slightly as he regarded her with new attention. "Guardian," he said slowly, "you are certain." "Ask Kael," Elena replied. "Ask about the curse on his eyes. Ask him why he can see again when everything your kind knows says that should be impossible." Ronan's gaze shifted to Kael. Something passed between them. A communication that Elena could not hear but could somehow sense. Questions and answers flowing in that space between shifters that she was only beginning to perceive. When Ronan looked at her again, the hostility in his eyes had dimmed. Not disappeared entirely, but reduced to something more like wariness. "We will talk," he said, "but not here. The hunters are closer than you know. We need to move." The journey to Wolf Haven took 3 days. 3 days that changed everything Elena thought she knew about herself and the world she inhabited. They traveled mostly at night, when the shadows provided cover and the world belonged to predators rather than prey. Elena rode on Kael's back for much of it, her body learning to move with his as he navigated terrain that would have been impassable on foot. The first night was the hardest. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow seemed to hold threats. She kept her hand near the shotgun strapped across her back, ready to defend against attacks that never came. By the second night, something had shifted. The forest no longer felt hostile. It felt alive. She began to sense things she could not explain. A wrongness in the air when they passed too close to a human settlement. A rightness when they entered territories that had never known human feet. Kael told her it was the guardian instincts awakening. The ability to feel the boundary between worlds, to sense where the natural ended and the supernatural began. Elena was not sure she believed him, but she could not deny the evidence of her own perceptions. The other wolves ranged around them in a loose formation, Ronan usually taking point, his centuries of experience reading the land like a map only he could see. Lyra, the russet female, served as scout, disappearing ahead for hours at a time before returning with reports of clear paths or potential dangers. Finn, the young one, stayed close to Elena and Kael, his curiosity about the human apparently overcoming his caution. During the day, when they rested in caves or dense thickets, the wolves shifted to human form, and Elena finally got to see them as people. Ronan was older than she had expected. Not physically. Like Kael, his human body appeared to be in its prime, perhaps 40 years old at most. But there was something ancient in his eyes, something that had seen centuries turn and empires fall and still endured. He spoke little, but when he did, every word carried weight. Lyra was nearly the opposite, quick to smile, quick to speak, with a restless energy that seemed barely contained by human form. She reminded Elena of certain soldiers she had served with, the ones who needed movement, needed action, who would rather run toward danger than wait for it to find them. And Finn was young in every sense, 34 years old, he told her proudly, as if this was an impressive number. He had been human once, turned by a bite during an attack that had killed his family. The pack had taken him in, taught him their ways, given him a new life. His enthusiasm for everything from the taste of fresh deer to the patterns of stars overhead was infectious. On the second night, during a rest stop in a shallow cave, Lyra approached Elena while the others slept. The russet-haired woman moved with a predator's grace even in human form, settling onto the rock beside Elena, with a fluid motion that seemed to require no effort at all. Her eyes, a warm amber in the dim light of their small fire, studied Elena with unguarded curiosity. "You are not afraid of us," Lyra said. It was an observation, not a question. Elena considered her response. "Should I be? Most humans would be. Most humans run screaming when they learn what we are, or they attack. Either way, fear drives them." Elena thought about this. She thought about the first time she had seen Kael shift, the way his bones had cracked and reformed, the way his skin had rippled like water. She thought about standing before Ronan in the forest, knowing that one wrong move could end with her throat torn out. She thought about all the moments when terror would have been the reasonable response. "I have seen a lot of things that scared me," she said finally. "Roadside bombs, insurgent attacks, watching good people die because we could not get to them in time." She met Lyra's eyes. "You are not the scariest thing I have encountered." Lyra was quiet for a moment. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. "What was," she asked, "the scariest thing?" Elena did not answer immediately. She stared into the flames and let the memories come. The hospital tent in Kandahar. The screaming that never seemed to stop. The young soldier whose leg she had tried to save, whose hand she had held when saving was no longer possible, whose eyes she still saw sometimes when she closed her own at night. "Helplessness," she finally said, "knowing someone is dying and not being able to do anything about it. That is the scariest thing. Being afraid for your own life is nothing compared to being afraid for someone else." Lyra absorbed this in silence. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Kael chose well," she said, "or perhaps you chose him. Either way, I am glad you found each other." She moved away before Elena could ask what she meant. On the morning of the third day, Ronan called a halt in a small valley surrounded by towering pines. The air was different here, cleaner somehow, charged with something Elena could not identify but could definitely feel. "This is the boundary," Ronan said. "Beyond this point is our territory. Wolf Haven lies half a day's journey north." He turned to face Elena directly. "Before we proceed, there are things you need to know." Elena straightened. "Tell me." "My pack does not know we are coming. There will be questions, suspicions. Not everyone will welcome a human among us, guardian or not." "I understand." "No, you do not." Ronan's voice hardened. "Some of my people have lost family to hunters, children, mates. They have learned through blood and grief that humans cannot be trusted. Your presence will open old wounds. Then why bring me at all?" "Because Kael insists. And because if what he says is true, if you are truly a conduit, you may be the only hope we have against what is coming." Ronan paused. "But if you betray us, if any harm comes to my pack because of you, I will kill you myself, guardian or not." Elena did not flinch. "Fair enough," she said. "And if any of your pack threatens me without cause, I will defend myself. Is that understood?" Ronan stared at her for a long moment. Then unexpectedly he smiled, a real smile that softened the hard planes of his face. "I begin to see," he said, "why Kael finds you interesting." Before Elena could respond, Finn came bounding over in wolf form, his tail wagging with an energy that seemed far too puppy-like for a 34-year-old shifter. "Ronan, Lyra says there is movement on the eastern ridge. Our people, they have seen us." Ronan nodded. "Then let us not keep them waiting." Wolf Haven was not what Elena had expected. She had imagined something primitive. Caves, perhaps, or rough shelters hidden in the wilderness. What she found instead was a village. A real village, with buildings constructed of timber and stone, with paths worn smooth by generations of feet, with smoke rising from chimneys and the sound of voices carried on the wind. The architecture was unlike anything she had seen before. The buildings seemed to grow out of the mountain itself, their walls curving in organic shapes that followed the natural contours of the rock. Windows were positioned to catch light at specific angles. Doors were wider than human proportions required, clearly designed to accommodate both forms that the residents might take. It was hidden perfectly in a natural bowl valley, surrounded by mountains so steep and forests so dense that no casual hiker would ever stumble upon it. The only approach was through a narrow pass that could be easily defended, and Elena noticed the sentries positioned along the ridgeline as they descended. Not obvious, not threatening, but present, watching. 300 years, she thought. They have been hiding here for 300 years, building this place, protecting their people, and the outside world has no idea they exist. The pack gathered to meet them as they entered the village proper. 18 souls, Kael had said, and Elena saw them all now, old and young, male and female, some in human form, some as wolves, a few caught in that between state that made her eyes hurt to look at directly. There were children, too. She had not expected that. Pups, she supposed she should call them. 3 or 4 of them, watching from behind their parents' legs with eyes that were too old and too knowing for their small faces. They had been born into hiding, born into a war they did not choose and could not escape. The sight of them made something tighten in Elena's chest, and at the center of the gathering stood an elderly woman with silver hair and golden eyes that were unmistakably related to Kael's. She stepped forward as they approached, her gaze fixed on her son with an expression that mixed joy and grief and anger in equal measure. 50 years, she said. The same words Ronan had used, but softer, weighted with a mother's pain. "I know," Kael replied. He had shifted to human form for this meeting, standing tall despite the obvious emotion in his voice. "I know, Mother, and I am sorry." "Sorry," Elder Mira's voice cracked. "I mourned you. We all mourned you. I performed the death rites. She stopped, took a breath. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. "But you are here now, alive, and that is what matters." She embraced him then, this ancient woman and her prodigal son, and Elena felt something twist in her chest. She thought of her own parents, dead when she was 12, of her grandmother, gone 5 years now, of Marcus, taken from her by lies she had only just begun to understand. When Mira finally released Kael, her attention turned to Elena. Those golden eyes studied her with an intensity that felt almost physical, probing beneath the surface of things. "You brought a human," Mira said. "I brought a guardian," Kael replied. "The last one." The murmur that went through the gathered pack was audible. Elena heard the word repeated. Guardian, guardian. Passed from voice to voice with tones ranging from disbelief to hope to suspicion. Mira approached her slowly. Up close, Elena could see the lines that centuries had etched into her face, the weight of years that no supernatural healing could entirely erase. "May I?" Mira asked, her hand extended toward the locket visible at Elena's throat. Elena hesitated only a moment before lifting the chain over her head and placing the pendant in Mira's palm. The old woman studied it for a long moment. Her fingers traced the 3 interlocking circles on the cover. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "I knew a guardian once," Mira said softly. "Many years ago. She bore the same mark." She paused. Her name was Vera. Elena's breath caught. "You knew my grandmother. Vera Kincaid was my friend, one of my closest friends. When the hunters began their purge, I begged her to stay with us, to let us protect her. But she refused. She said her path led elsewhere, that she had to disappear so that something important could survive." "Me," Elena whispered. Mira nodded. "You, her legacy, the continuation of everything she was." She returned the locket to Elena with reverent care. "Welcome to Wolf Haven," Mira said. "Welcome, granddaughter of my heart. We have waited a long time for you." The welcome feast that night was modest by human standards, but clearly significant to the pack. fresh game roasted over open fires, berries and roots gathered from the forest. Simple fare, but prepared with care and shared with ceremony. Elena sat between Kael and his mother, answering questions about her life, about Vera, about how she had found Kael in the storm. The pack listened with varying degrees of interest. Some seemed genuinely curious. Others watched her with barely concealed suspicion. She understood. Trust was not given freely among these people. It had to be earned. As the meal wound down and the fire burned low, Ronan stood and addressed the gathering. "There is other news," he said. His voice carried the weight of a pronouncement. News that cannot wait. The festive atmosphere evaporated instantly. Elena saw Kael stiffen beside her. "Speak," Mira said. 3 days ago, one of our scouts returned from the south." Ronan's jaw tightened. He had been captured by Blackwood's hunters 6 months ago. We thought him dead. "But he escaped," Finn interrupted, then wilted under Ronan's glare. "Sorry, continue." "He escaped," Ronan confirmed. "Barely. What he told us changes everything." The Alpha paused, seeming to gather himself for what came next. "Sarah is alive." Elena felt Kael's whole body jerk as if struck by lightning. His sister, the one taken 6 months ago, the one he had mentioned with such guilt and grief. "What?" Kael breathed. "Alive," Ronan repeated. "Along with 5 others we thought lost. They are being held in a facility in the mountains, a compound that Blackwood has been using for experimentation." The word fell into the silence like a stone into still water. "What kind of experimentation?" Mira asked. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. Ronan looked at Elena. "Perhaps our guardian should tell them," he said. "After all, she has experienced Blackwood's methods firsthand, or her husband did." Every eye in the gathering turned to Elena. She felt the weight of their attention, the questions unspoken but clear in their gazes. She thought of Marcus, of the truth she had learned only days ago, of the rage that had been building inside her ever since. "My husband was murdered," she said. Her voice did not waver. The hunters made it look like cancer, but it was poison, silver poison, designed to kill anyone with shifter blood in their ancestry without leaving evidence. The reaction was immediate. Growls from those in wolf form, curses from those in human shape, a rising tide of anger that Elena could feel pressing against her skin. She continued, "I did not know what he was. He did not know what he was. But Blackwood's people knew. They have records going back centuries, family trees, genetic markers. They track anyone with even a drop of shifter ancestry and eliminate them one by one." Ronan nodded grimly. "And now they have found a new use for our people," he said. "The captured shifters are being drained, their essence extracted to power weapons, technology designed to hunt and kill more of us." Elena thought of the sonic disruptor the attackers had used at her cabin, of how it had affected Kael, of the blue light and the high-pitched sound that had seemed designed specifically to cause shifter pain. "The device they used against us," she said, "during the attack on my property. Is that what they are making?" "That and worse." Ronan's expression was grim, much worse. Kael stood abruptly. His face was pale, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "My sister," he said. "My sister is alive, and she is being used as a battery for their weapons." "Kael." Mira reached for him. "No." He pulled away from her touch. "This is my fault. She went looking for me. After I disappeared, she went looking for me and they caught her." "You did not know," Elena said quietly. "I should have known." Kael's voice cracked. "I should have been here. Instead, I was out there, alone, trying to fix something that could not be fixed, and my sister paid the price." Elena stood and faced him. She did not touch him, did not try to comfort him with empty words. She simply met his eyes and said what needed to be said. "Then we get her back." Kael stared at her. "How?" "I do not know yet. We figure it out, we make a plan, and we execute it." Elena looked around at the gathered pack. That is what you do when someone takes your family. You do whatever it takes to bring them home. She turned to Ronan. "Where is this facility?" 3 days north, the Alpha replied. "Hidden in an old military compound that was supposedly decommissioned decades ago. Our scout barely escaped with his life. He counted at least 30 hunters inside, plus whatever technology they have developed." 30 hunters, Elena repeated. "Against how many shifters willing to fight?" "At most, 12. Ronan's expression was bleak. "Many of our people are too young or too old for combat, and we cannot leave the village entirely undefended. 12 against 30, bad odds by any measure. But Elena had faced worse, in the desert, In field hospitals with bombs falling and supplies running low, and patients who needed saving regardless of what was possible. "What about this conduit ability?" she asked, turning to Mira. "You said your guardian friend had the same mark on her locket. Did she ever use it in combat?" Mira considered the question carefully. "Vera could amplify our abilities," she said slowly, "make our shifts faster, our healing more powerful. She could also suppress them, create zones where no supernatural power could function." "That would affect the hunters too," Elena said. "Their technology, their weapons. If those are powered by stolen shifter essence, then disrupting that essence would disable the weapons." Mira's eyes widened with understanding. "You are thinking of using yourself as a null zone, canceling out everything supernatural within a certain radius. Would that work?" "In theory, yes." Mira's expression grew troubled. "But Vera trained for decades before she could control her abilities with any precision. You have known about yours for less than a week. Then I have less than a week to learn." The words hung in the air. Around the fire, the pack exchanged glances, some skeptical, some worried, some showing the first glimmers of something that might have been hope. Ronan stepped forward. "You would risk your life for our people," he said. "People you have known for hours." Elena thought about how to answer. She thought about duty and honor and all the abstract concepts that had guided her through years of service. But those were not why she was doing this. "I am doing it for me," she said honestly. "Because Blackwood took my husband. Because he took my chance at a normal life. Because he has been hunting people like you for generations and people like me for just as long. And I am tired of being the one who gets hunted." She met Ronan's eyes. "I am doing it because when I found Kael in the mud, something inside me woke up, something that had been sleeping my whole life. And whatever that something is, it is telling me that this is what I was born to do." Silence stretched between them. Then Ronan did something Elena did not expect. He smiled. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said. And then to the gathered pack, "We begin planning tomorrow. Anyone with combat experience, report to me at dawn. And you," he looked at Elena, "you begin training with Mira immediately. We do not have much time, so we will have to make the most of what we have." Elena nodded. "I understand." As the gathering dispersed and the pack members drifted toward their homes, Kael approached her. His face was still pale, still tight with emotion, but there was something else there now, something that looked like gratitude. "Why?" he asked simply. Elena knew what he was really asking. Why fight for people she barely knew? Why risk her life for a cause that was not hers? Why step into a war that had been raging for centuries without her? She reached up and touched the locket at her throat. The metal was warm against her fingers. "Because this is what I was made for," she said. "I think I always knew it, somewhere deep down. I just did not have the words until now." Kael reached out and took her hand. His fingers were warm and strong, and when they touched, Elena felt that spark again. That connection. Not magic exactly, but something close. Something that had been building since that first night in the rain, when she had looked into the eyes of a dying creature and seen something worth saving. "Then we do this together," he said. Together, Elena agreed. They stood like that for a moment, hand in hand under the starlight. Two people who had come together through circumstance and choice, not fate. Elena did not believe in fate, but perhaps she was beginning to believe in something else, in purpose, in the idea that some meetings were not accidents, that some connections were meant to forge links strong enough to change the world. Behind them, the sounds of the village settling for the night created a backdrop of normalcy. Children being put to bed, fires being banked, the quiet conversations of people who had known each other for decades, for centuries. A community that had survived against impossible odds and was now preparing to risk everything on a desperate rescue mission, led by a human who had only just learned she was something more. Elena thought about the faces she had seen tonight, the hope in some eyes, the fear in others, the children hiding behind their parents, watching the strange human with curiosity and wariness. She thought about Sarah, somewhere in the darkness, being drained of her essence to power weapons designed to kill her own kind. She thought about all the others who had been taken, who had been presumed dead, who were suffering at this very moment while she stood here under the stars. She thought about Marcus. He would have told her she was crazy. He always had been the cautious one, the planner, the one who weighed risks and calculated odds before making any decision. But he also would have understood. Underneath the caution, Underneath the careful analysis, Marcus had been a man who believed in doing what was right regardless of the cost. That was why the hunters had killed him. Not because he was a threat, not because he even knew what he was, but because his bloodline represented a possibility they could not tolerate, a potential that had to be eliminated. Elena squeezed Kael's hand. "Tell me about Sarah," she said. "What is she like?" Kael's expression softened at the mention of his sister. "She is young, 89, which in our terms is barely an adult, impulsive, stubborn. She never listens to anyone, especially not me. When I left 50 years ago, she was just a child. I thought she would forget me. I hoped she would. But she did not. She did not." Kael's voice roughened. "When I went missing, she went looking for me. Alone. Despite everyone telling her it was too dangerous. Despite knowing what the hunters would do if they caught her. She sounds brave. She sounds like a fool." The words were harsh, but the tone was not. "She sounds exactly like I was at her age. Certain that she could fix anything, that she could save anyone, that nothing bad could ever really happen as long as she was brave enough." He fell silent for a moment, looking up at the stars. "I spent 50 years running from my people because I thought I knew better than them. Because I believed that if I could just talk to the hunters, if I could just make them understand, we could find a way to coexist." He shook his head. "I was wrong. Some people cannot be reasoned with. Some hatred is too deep to bridge." Elena thought about this, about the long arc of conflict that stretched back generations, about the hunters who had passed down their vendetta like a family heirloom, about Blackwood, whoever he was, carrying on a war that had started before his grandfather was born. "What changed your mind?" she asked. Kael turned to look at her. His golden eyes, which had been restored by her presence in ways neither of them fully understood, gleamed in the starlight. "You did," he said simply. "You found me dying in the mud, and you chose to help me. Not because we were the same, not because you understood what I was, but because it was the right thing to do." He paused. "I spent decades trying to prove that humans and shifters could understand each other, and then a human proved it to me without trying at all." Elena did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. She just held his hand and watched the stars wheel overhead and let herself feel the strangeness of the moment, the impossibility of it all, the way her life had been turned inside out in the span of a few weeks. Somewhere out there, beyond the mountains and the forests and the boundary that separated this hidden world from the one she had always known, enemies were gathering. Weapons were being forged. Plans were being made. Tomorrow, she would begin training to unlock abilities she did not understand. Tomorrow, she would start preparing for a battle that might very well kill her. Tomorrow, everything would become real in ways she could not yet imagine. But tonight, she could stand here in the darkness with Kael's hand in hers and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could actually win. Above them, the stars wheeled through the mountain sky. Somewhere in the darkness, Blackwood's hunters were planning their next move, gathering their weapons, preparing for a war they thought they had already won. They did not know that the last guardian had awakened. They did not know that the boundary had grown thin. And they did not know that Elena Vance was coming for them. By the time they realized it, it would be too late. The training began at dawn. Elena stood in a clearing at the edge of Wolf Haven, the morning mist curling around her ankles like ghostly fingers. Elder Mira faced her from 10 paces away, her silver hair catching the first rays of sunlight that filtered through the canopy above. Despite her apparent age, the old woman radiated a vitality that Elena was only beginning to understand had nothing to do with physical youth. "Show me the locket," Mira said. Elena pulled the chain over her head and held the pendant in her open palm. The metal was warm, as it always was now. Ever since the night Kael's eyes had fully healed, the locket had maintained a constant temperature slightly above her own body heat, like it was alive, like it was waiting. Mira approached slowly, her golden eyes fixed on the 3 interlocking circles etched into the silver surface. "Do you know what these symbols mean?" she asked. "Kael said they mark me as a conduit." "Yes, but do you understand what that means? Truly?" Elena shook her head. "Only what he told me. That conduits can amplify or suppress supernatural energy. That we are rare. Rare." Mira's laugh was soft and sad. "Child, you are not rare. You are singular, the last of your kind. When you die, the line of conduits dies with you, unless you pass the gift to another before your time comes." The weight of this statement settled over Elena like a physical burden. She had known she was the last guardian, but somehow, hearing it spoken aloud by this ancient woman who had known her grandmother, who had watched the systematic destruction of everything Elena was supposed to represent, made it real in a way it had not been before. The 3 circles represent the 3 aspects of your power, Mira continued. The first is perception, the ability to sense supernatural energy, to feel the boundary between worlds, to know truth from lies. I have felt that, Elena said, since finding Kael. Things feel different now, clearer. The second is amplification, the ability to strengthen supernatural abilities, to make a shifter's healing faster, their senses sharper, their shift smoother. This is what healed Kael's blindness. Your presence amplified his natural regeneration until it overwhelmed the curse. And the third, Mira's expression grew grave. The third is nullification, the ability to suppress supernatural energy, to create zones where no magic can function, where shifters cannot shift, where curses cannot hold. Elena considered this. That could be useful against the hunters. Their weapons are powered by stolen shifter energy. If I could nullify that energy, you could render their weapons useless, Mira confirmed. But there is a cost. Everything has a cost. Using nullification drains your own life force. Push too hard and you will kill yourself. How do I know how hard is too hard? You learn. Mira's voice softened. Your grandmother trained for decades before she mastered fine control. You have days, perhaps hours. We will do what we can, but you must understand the limitations. Elena squared her shoulders. Then let us begin. The training was brutal. Mira started with perception, which Elena had already begun to develop instinctively. She learned to extend her senses beyond the physical, to feel the boundary between the natural and supernatural like a membrane stretched across reality. She learned to identify individual shifters by their energy signatures, each one unique as a fingerprint. She learned to detect lies not through words or expressions, but through the subtle dissonance they created in the fabric of truth. By midday, she had progressed to amplification. This proved more difficult. Mira had Finn serve as a test subject, and Elena spent hours trying to consciously enhance his abilities. The results were inconsistent. Sometimes his shift would accelerate dramatically. Sometimes nothing happened at all. Sometimes she pushed too hard and sent him into a partial shift that left him stuck between forms, writhing in pain until Mira talked her through reversing the effect. Nullification came last, as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. This is the most dangerous aspect of your gift, Mira warned, and the most powerful. When you nullify, you are not simply blocking energy. You are absorbing it into yourself. Your body becomes a vessel for forces it was never designed to contain. What happens if I absorb too much? The vessel breaks, Mira said simply. Your grandmother once absorbed a curse meant to destroy an entire pack. It took her 3 months to recover, and she was never quite the same afterward. Elena looked down at the locket in her hand. The metal pulsed with warmth, almost like a heartbeat. The locket helps, Mira added. It acts as a focus, a way to channel and direct your abilities. Without it, your power would be wild, unfocused. With it, you have a measure of control. Is that why my grandmother gave it to me? Partly. Mira's eyes grew distant, but also because it was all she had left to give. Everything else had been taken from her. Her home, her people, her purpose. The locket was her last connection to what she had been. By giving it to you, she was passing on not just power, but hope. Elena closed her fingers around the pendant. The warmth spread up her arm, into her chest, toward her heart. I will not waste it, she said. That evening, Ronan called a council of war. The gathering took place in the largest building in Wolf Haven, a structure that served as both meeting hall and communal space. Every adult member of the pack was present, along with Elena and Kael. The atmosphere was tense, charged with the particular electricity that precedes violence. A map had been spread across the central table. Elena recognized the terrain from her journey here, the mountains, the valleys, the narrow passes that connected them. And there, marked in red, the location of Blackwood's compound. The intelligence we have gathered shows the facility is built into an old military installation, Ronan began. Cold War era, officially decommissioned 30 years ago. In reality, it has been operated by the Blackwood family for 3 generations. He pointed to various locations on the map as he spoke. The main entrance is here on the southern face, heavily fortified. Motion sensors, thermal imaging, armed guards on rotation. A frontal assault would be suicide. What about the other entrances, Lara asked. There are two: a service access on the western side, used for supply deliveries, and an emergency exit on the northern face, designed as an escape route. Both are guarded, but less heavily than the main entrance. "How many hunters total?" Kael asked. His voice was controlled, but Elena could see the tension in his jaw, the barely contained fury that had been building since he learned his sister was still alive. "Our scout counted approximately 30, Ronan replied. "But that was 2 weeks ago. The number may have changed." "And our forces. 12 combat ready." Ronan's expression was grim. "The odds are not in our favor." Silence fell over the gathering. Elena looked around at the faces of the pack members. She saw fear in some, determination in others, and in all of them, a desperate hope that there might be a way to save their captured kin without sacrificing more lives in the process. She stepped forward. "The odds change if we can disable their weapons," she said. Every eye turned to her. "Their technology is powered by stolen shifter essence. If I can nullify that energy, their weapons become useless. They would be fighting with conventional firearms against shifters at full strength." Ronan considered this. "You have had 1 day of training. Can you actually do what you are suggesting?" Elena met his gaze. "I do not know," she admitted. "But I know that without me, you are sending 12 people against 30 armed hunters with weapons specifically designed to kill your kind. With me, there is at least a chance." "And if you fail," Ronan pressed, "if you cannot nullify their weapons, or if the strain kills you, then you are no worse off than you would have been without me." Another silence. Ronan looked at Mira, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Very well," the Alpha said. "Here is what I propose." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Elena would infiltrate the compound first, alone. Her human nature would allow her to bypass the supernatural detection systems that would immediately alert the hunters to shifter presence. She would make her way to the power core of the facility, where the captured shifters were being held and drained. Once there, she would use her nullification ability to create a dead zone. All supernatural energy within the zone would be suppressed, including the energy powering the hunters' weapons. At that moment, she would signal the pack. The assault team, led by Kael and Lyra, would enter through the western service access. Their objective was the prison cells. Free the captives, get them out, do not engage unless necessary. Ronan would lead a second team through the northern exit. Their job was distraction. Draw the hunters' attention away from the rescue operation. Make noise, cause chaos. Give the extraction team time to complete their mission. If everything went according to plan, they would be in and out within 15 minutes. If things went wrong, they would improvise. Things always went wrong. The night before the operation, Elena found herself unable to sleep. She walked through the quiet village, past the darkened homes where the pack members slept or pretended to sleep, past the training ground where she had spent the day pushing her abilities to their limits, past the edge of the settlement to a rocky outcrop that overlooked the valley below. Kael found her there an hour before midnight. He did not speak as he approached, just settled onto the rock beside her and looked out at the same view she had been contemplating. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the mountains. Somewhere out there, his sister was suffering. Somewhere out there, enemies were preparing for a battle they did not know was coming. "You should be resting," Elena said finally. "So should you." She almost smiled. "I have never been good at resting before a mission. Too many thoughts." "What kind of thoughts?" Elena considered the question. She could give him the easy answer, the professional answer. Talk about tactical concerns and contingency plans and the 1,000 things that could go wrong tomorrow. Instead, she told him the truth. "I am thinking about Marcus," she said, "about how he died believing it was just bad luck. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong genes. He never knew what he was, never had the chance to understand. Do you wish you could tell him? I wish I could tell him it was not random, that his death meant something, that the people responsible are going to pay." She paused. "Is that wrong? To want revenge?" Kael was quiet for a moment. "Among my people, we do not call it revenge. We call it justice. And justice is never wrong." Elena looked at him. In the moonlight, his features seemed carved from stone, beautiful and terrible and ancient in a way that had nothing to do with physical age. "What if I fail tomorrow?" she asked. "What if I cannot control the nullification? What if I absorb too much and die before I can help anyone?" "Then you will have died trying," Kael said. "And that is more than most people ever do. Very comforting." "I am not trying to comfort you. I am trying to tell you the truth." He turned to face her fully. "Elena, From the moment you found me in that storm, you have done nothing but fight. Fight to save me. Fight to understand what you are. Fight to accept a destiny you never asked for. Whatever happens tomorrow, no one can take that away from you." Elena felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of tension she had not realized she was carrying. "Why do you care so much?" she asked. "About what happens to me? We have known each other for weeks. In the span of your life, that is nothing." Kael reached out and took her hand. His touch was warm, solid, real in a way that grounded her to the present moment. "Because in all my years, I have never met anyone like you," he said. "Because you looked at a monster bleeding in the mud and saw something worth saving. Because you learned that your entire world was a lie, and your response was to fight harder, not to run." He paused. "And because when I am with you, I remember what it feels like to hope." Elena did not pull away. She let his words sink in, let herself feel the weight of them. "I am scared," she admitted, "not of dying, of failing, of letting everyone down." "You will not," Kael said. "I know this because I know you. You do not know how to fail. It is not in your nature. You cannot know that. I can." He lifted her hand and pressed it to his chest, over his heart. "I can feel it here, the same way you can feel the boundary between worlds. There is a connection between us, Elena. I do not fully understand it, but I trust it. And I trust you." Elena looked into his golden eyes. She saw herself reflected there, not the broken woman who had fled to the mountains to escape her grief, not the confused human stumbling through a supernatural world she did not understand. She saw herself as he saw her, strong, capable, worthy. She leaned forward and kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce, desperate, full of all the fear and hope and longing that had been building between them since that first night in the rain. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them on this rock under the moon. When they finally broke apart, Elena was breathing hard. "That was not in the plan," she said. "Some things are better unplanned," Kael replied. They sat together as the moon climbed higher, drawing strength from each other's presence. Tomorrow would bring blood and fire and the very real possibility of death. But tonight, for a few stolen hours, they could simply be two people who had found each other against impossible odds. Tomorrow the boundary would be tested. Tonight it could wait. The compound loomed against the pre-dawn sky like a wound in the mountainside. Elena approached alone, dressed in the maintenance uniform Lyra had stolen from a supply truck 2 days earlier. Her heart pounded against her ribs, but her hands were steady. The locket hung heavy against her chest, warm and pulsing with energy. The Western Service entrance was exactly where the intelligence had said it would be. A metal door set into the concrete face of the mountain, flanked by a single guard who looked bored and cold in the early morning chill. Elena walked toward him with the confidence of someone who belonged there. "Delivery," she said, holding up a clipboard she had found in the stolen truck. The guard frowned. "It is 4 a.m. Special order. Came in last night. They said it was urgent." The guard looked at the clipboard, then at her face, then at the door behind him. For a moment, Elena thought he was going to question her further. But the cold was clearly getting to him, and the prospect of going back to his warm post was more appealing than interrogating a delivery worker at this hour. "Fine," he swiped his keycard, "but make it quick." Elena nodded and stepped through the door. Inside, the compound was a maze of corridors and locked rooms. She moved quickly but carefully, following the mental map she had memorized during the planning session. Left at the first junction, straight for 200 meters, right at the stairs, down 3 levels. The further she descended, the more she could feel it, the energy of the captured shifters. It pressed against her senses like a physical weight, a chorus of pain and fear and desperation that made her want to scream. She pushed through it, focused on the mission, find the power core, create the null zone, signal the pack. The power core was in the lowest level of the facility, behind a door marked with warnings about high voltage and authorized personnel only. Elena did not hesitate. She pulled the lockpicks from her pocket, tools she had learned to use during her army days, and went to work. The door opened after 30 seconds. What she found inside made her stop cold. The room was large, circular, dominated by a machine that looked like something out of a nightmare. 6 pods arranged around a central pillar, each containing a shifter in various states of consciousness. Tubes ran from their bodies to the pillar, carrying a glowing blue substance that Elena instinctively recognized as their essence, their life force, being drained away drop by drop to power the weapons of their enemies. And in the nearest pod, her eyes closed and her face gaunt with suffering, was a young woman who could only be Sarah, Kael's sister. Elena moved to the pod and pressed her hands against the glass. Up close, she could see the damage, the dark circles under Sarah's eyes, the pallor of her skin, the way her chest barely rose and fell with each shallow breath. 6 months of this. 6 months of being used as a battery while her family believed she was dead. "I'm going to get you out of here," Elena whispered. "I promise." A voice spoke from behind her. "I rather doubt that." Elena spun around. The man standing in the doorway was older than she had expected. 60 perhaps, with close-cropped silver hair and the rigid posture of a career military officer. His eyes were pale blue, cold as winter ice, and they studied her with the detached interest of a scientist examining a specimen. "Colonel Silas Blackwood," Elena said. "You know my name." The colonel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then you have me at a disadvantage. I do not believe we have met." "We have not, but you killed my husband." Something flickered in Blackwood's eyes, a spark of recognition, or perhaps curiosity. "Your husband," he repeated. "I have killed many people over the years. You will have to be more specific." "Marcus Vance." Elena's voice was steady despite the rage building in her chest. 3 years ago, you made it look like cancer." Blackwood considered this for a moment. Then his smile widened. "Ah, the latent carrier in Washington. Yes, I remember now. Unfortunate, really." He showed no signs of the gene expressing, but one cannot be too careful with these things. Better to eliminate the possibility before it becomes a problem. Elena felt the locket pulse against her skin. The energy of the captured shifters surged around her, responding to her emotions. "You murdered an innocent man," she said. "A man who did not even know what he was." "Innocent." Blackwood shook his head. "There is no such thing as an innocent monster, or an innocent person who carries the potential to become one." He stepped further into the room, and Elena saw the weapon in his hand. Not a gun. Something else. A device that glowed with the same blue light as the tubes draining the shifters. "I assume you are the guardian the scouts reported," Blackwood continued. "The one who healed Thornwood's blindness. I must admit I thought your kind was extinct. It seems I was mistaken." Elena's mind raced. She needed to create the null zone, needed to signal the pack. But Blackwood was between her and the door, and the weapon in his hand was almost certainly designed to kill her. "I am curious," the colonel said. "How does it feel? To discover that your entire life has been a lie, that the man you loved was murdered by forces you did not know existed, that you yourself are a monster, hiding in human skin." "I am not the monster here." "No." Blackwood's voice hardened. "I am." He raised the weapon. Elena acted on instinct. She reached for the nullification power within her, the third aspect of her gift that Mira had warned her about. She reached for it and pulled with everything she had. The effect was immediate and devastating. A wave of energy exploded outward from her body, invisible but undeniable. The blue glow in Blackwood's weapon flickered and died. The pods around the room went dark, their draining apparatus suddenly inert. The lights overhead sputtered and failed, plunging the room into emergency red. And Elena felt the cost. It was like being burned from the inside out. The energy she had absorbed screamed through her body, seeking release, tearing at her cells and her sanity. She staggered, nearly falling, and only the wall behind her kept her upright. Blackwood stared at his useless weapon in disbelief. Then he looked at her with something that might have been respect. "Impressive," he said, "truly impressive." He dropped the device and drew a conventional pistol from his belt. "But you cannot nullify bullets." He fired. The shot went wide as a massive black shape crashed through the door behind him. Kael, in full wolf form, hit Blackwood like a freight train, sending the colonel sprawling across the floor. The pistol skittered away into the darkness. "Elena!" Kael shouted, his voice distorted by his wolf form. "The pods! Free them!" She pushed off from the wall, fighting through the agony that threatened to overwhelm her. Her hands found the release mechanism on Sarah's pod. She pulled. The glass slid open, and Sarah tumbled forward into her arms. "Easy!" Elena gasped. "I have got you! You are safe!" Sarah's eyes fluttered open. They were the same gold as Kael's, but dimmer, weaker. 6 months of torture had nearly extinguished the light within them. "Who?" Sarah whispered. "A friend." Elena helped her to her feet. "Your brother is here. We are getting you out." Around the room, other shifters were emerging from their pods. Lyra had appeared, along with Finn and two others Elena did not recognize. They moved quickly, efficiently, helping the weakened captives toward the exit. But Blackwood was not finished. The colonel had regained his feet and produced a knife from somewhere on his person. A silver knife, Elena realized, seeing the way it gleamed even in the dim emergency lighting. "You think you have won!" Blackwood snarled. "You think freeing a few prisoners changes anything. There are more of us than you can imagine. More facilities, more weapons. This war has been going on for generations, and it will continue long after you are dead." "Maybe," Elena said, "but you will not be there to see it." She reached for her power again, knowing the cost, knowing it might kill her. But before she could act, Kael was there. The wolf and the colonel collided in a fury of teeth and blade. Silver flashed, blood sprayed. The sounds of combat filled the room, animal snarls mixing with human screams. Elena wanted to help, wanted to intervene, but her body would not cooperate. The energy she had absorbed was tearing her apart from the inside, and it was taking everything she had just to remain conscious. Sarah clutched at her arm. "Brother!" she gasped. "Help him!" Elena looked at the battle. Kael was winning, his superior speed and strength overwhelming Blackwood's training. But the silver knife had found its mark more than once, and shifter or not, those wounds would slow him down. She made a decision. Reaching deep within herself, she found the amplification aspect of her power. The second circle, the ability to strengthen supernatural abilities. She reached out with everything she had left and poured it into Kael. The effect was immediate. His movements accelerated, becoming almost too fast to follow. His wounds began to close even as the silver burned them open. He became something more than wolf, more than man, a force of nature given physical form. Blackwood never stood a chance. The final blow came faster than Elena could track. One moment the colonel was standing. The next he was on the floor, Kael's jaws around his throat. "Wait!" Elena called out, her voice barely a whisper. Kael froze. His golden eyes found her through the chaos. "Wait!" she repeated. She stumbled forward, Sarah still clinging to her arm. "There is something you should know." She looked down at Blackwood. The colonel was still alive, though barely. Blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth. His pale eyes stared up at her with a hatred that transcended mere violence. "Tell them," Elena said. "Tell them what you really are." Blackwood laughed, a wet gurgling sound that ended in a cough. "You think they would believe me?" he rasped. "You think it matters?" "It matters to me." For a long moment, silence hung in the air. Then Blackwood spoke. "My grandfather was bitten in 1920, he said, by a shifter he thought was his friend. He survived, but the bite changed him. Not enough to shift, just enough to know what he was becoming, just enough to hate it." Kael's grip loosened slightly. "You carry shifter blood," he said. "A fraction of a fraction." Blackwood's smile was bloody, too diluted to express, too strong to ignore. "I am the thing I have spent my life trying to destroy, and I would rather die than live with that knowledge." He moved suddenly, faster than a dying man should be able to move. His hand found the silver knife where it had fallen. He pressed it to his own chest. "End it," he said to Kael, "or I will." Kael looked at Elena. She saw the question in his eyes, the uncertainty. This man had tortured his people, killed his friends, imprisoned his sister for 6 months of agony. He deserved death 1,000 times over. But he was also a victim. Twisted by circumstance, destroyed by a heritage he never asked for. In another life, another time, he might have been one of them. "Let him choose," Elena said quietly. Kael released his grip and stepped back. Blackwood held the knife against his chest for a long moment. His pale eyes found Elena's. "Your grandmother," he said. "She tried to save my grandfather. Did you know that? She tried to help him accept what he was. He refused, and his hatred became our family legacy. I did not know. She was the last good person I ever met." Blackwood's voice was fading. "Until you." He pressed the blade home. The silver entered his heart with a sound that Elena knew she would remember for the rest of her life. Blackwood's body jerked once, twice, and then went still. His pale eyes glazed over, staring at nothing. It was done. The evacuation was chaos. Alarms were blaring throughout the compound. Hunters were converging from every direction. But without their supernatural weapons, they were just men with guns. And the shifters, even weakened, were more than a match for them. Elena moved through the corridors in a daze. The energy she had absorbed was still burning through her, and she could feel herself fading. Her vision blurred. Her legs refused to cooperate. If not for Sarah on one side and Finn on the other, she would have collapsed. "Stay with us," Finn urged. "We are almost out." Almost. The word seemed to come from very far away. The northern exit appeared ahead of them, Ronan holding it open while the last of the rescuees stumbled through. Daylight spilled across the concrete, blindingly bright after the darkness of the compound. Elena made it 3 steps outside before her legs gave out. She fell into Kael's arms. He had shifted back to human form, and his face swam above her, tight with concern. Elena, stay with me." She tried to speak, but no words came. The world was growing dark around the edges. The locket against her chest was burning, the metal almost too hot to bear. "What is happening to her?" Kael demanded. Mira appeared in Elena's field of vision. Her golden eyes were wide with fear. "She absorbed too much," the old woman said. "The energy is tearing her apart. We need to ground it somehow." "How?" "I do not know. This is beyond anything." She stopped. "The locket. Give me the locket." Kael reached for the chain around Elena's neck. When his fingers touched the silver, he hissed in pain. "It is burning," he said. "It is trying to channel the excess energy," Mira realized. "But it was not designed for this much power. It is going to." The locket exploded, not with fire or shrapnel, with light. Pure white light that erupted from the silver casing and washed over Elena like a wave. She felt the energy within her surge toward that light, felt it being pulled from her body and directed somewhere else, anywhere else. And then darkness claimed her. She dreamed of her grandmother. Vera Kincaid stood in a field of wildflowers, looking exactly as she had in the photograph inside the locket. Young, beautiful, full of a life that Elena had only known in its twilight years. "You did well," Vera said. "I do not feel like I did well," Elena replied. "I feel like I almost died." "Almost is not the same as did." Vera smiled. "The boundary holds because you held it. The balance is restored because you restored it. That is what we do, child. That is what we have always done. I do not know how to be a guardian. I do not know how to be what you were." Vera reached out and touched Elena's face. Her hand was warm, solid, real in a way that dreams should not be. "You already are," she said. "You have been since the moment you chose to help that wolf in the rain. Being a guardian is not about power or training or ancient bloodlines. It is about choice, about deciding that the boundary matters, that both worlds deserve to exist, that you will stand between them and hold the line. What if I am not strong enough? Then you will find strength in others." Vera's eyes sparkled with something that might have been pride. "You have already begun. The wolf, his pack. They are yours now as much as you are theirs. That is how it works. That is how it has always worked." The field of flowers began to fade, the light growing brighter around them. "I have to go now," Vera said, "but remember what I told you. When the boundary grows thin, you will know what to do." "I remember." "Then wake up, child." Vera's smile was the last thing to fade. "Wake up and live." Elena opened her eyes to find Kael watching her. She was lying on a bed of furs in a room she did not recognize. Sunlight streamed through a window, warm and golden. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke and something else, something like hope. "You are awake," Kael said. His voice cracked on the words. "I was afraid. I thought." "How long?" Elena asked. Her voice was a rasp, her throat dry and raw. "A week." Kael took her hand. His fingers were shaking. "You have been unconscious for a week. Mira said the energy you absorbed nearly killed you. She said the locket saved your life, but it changed." Elena lifted her free hand to her chest. The locket was gone. In its place, she felt something else. A raised pattern on her skin, directly over her heart. She looked down and saw the 3 interlocking circles, no longer etched in silver, but somehow branded into her flesh. Not a scar. Something else. Something that glowed faintly with a light that seemed to come from within. "What happened?" she whispered. "The locket fused with you," Kael explained. "When it channeled the excess energy, it burned away the metal, but the symbol remained. Mira says it means the power is part of you now, permanent, unremovable." Elena stared at the mark. The 3 circles seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. "Is that good or bad?" "Mira thinks it is good." Kael's smile was tentative. "She says you are no longer just a guardian. You have become something new, something that has not existed before." Elena absorbed this information. Her entire body ached. Her mind felt like it had been scraped raw and put back together wrong. But beneath all of that, she felt something else, a sense of rightness, of purpose. "Sarah," she asked, "the others, did they? All safe, all recovering?" Kael's smile widened. "Sarah woke 2 days ago. She has been asking about you constantly. She wants to meet the woman who saved her life. I did not do it alone. No, but you did the part that no one else could do." Kael squeezed her hand. "The pack has been talking about what you did, about what it means. Ronan wants to." He paused. "He wants to offer you a place among us, formally." "What kind of place?" "They want to name you Luna." Kael's eyes met hers. "It is a title of honor. The mate of a pack leader, the protector of the people. It would make you one of us, officially." Elena thought about this. A week ago, she had been a woman alone in the mountains, running from grief, trying to find a reason to keep living. Now she was being offered a family, a purpose, a home. "And Kael, what do you want?" she asked. "I want you to stay," he said simply, "not because of duty or honor or ancient traditions, because these past weeks with you have been the first time in 50 years that I have felt like myself. Because when I look at you, I see a future I want to live for. Because I love you, Elena Vance, and I do not want to face whatever comes next without you beside me." The words hung in the air between them, simple and true and terrifying in their implications. Elena reached up and touched his face. He leaned into her palm, his eyes closing. "I am not good at this," she said. "At belonging, at letting people in. I have spent most of my life building walls and keeping everyone at a distance." "I know. But I am tired of walls. I am tired of distance. I am tired of being alone." She took a breath. "So, yes, I will stay, not because of what I am or what the pack needs or what honor demands, because I choose to, because you are the first person in years who has made me want to choose anything at all." Kael kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Elena saw that the sun had moved across the window. Hours or minutes, she could not tell. Time seemed to flow differently now, measured not in seconds but in moments of connection. "There is a ceremony," Kael said, "to officially name you Luna. Ronan wants to hold it tonight, if you are strong enough." "Tonight," Elena repeated. "The pack has waited long enough. They want to celebrate, to honor what was accomplished, to welcome you as one of their own." Elena looked down at the mark on her chest. The 3 circles pulsed with light, with life, with a power she was only beginning to understand. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the rain and the mud and the dying wolf, the revelations that had shattered everything she thought she knew, the battles and the training and the moment in Blackwood's compound when she had poured everything she had into holding the line. She thought about Marcus, who had never known what he was, about her grandmother, who had known everything and chosen to hide anyway, about all the people who had lived and died in this secret war on both sides of the boundary. And she thought about the future, about what it might mean to stand between worlds, to be a guardian in truth, not just in name, to protect the boundary and the people on both sides of it for as long as she lived. It would not be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. But for the first time in years, Elena Vance knew exactly who she was and exactly what she was meant to do. "Help me up," she said. Kael offered his hand and she took it. Together they walked out into the light. The ceremony that night was simple but profound. The entire pack gathered in the central clearing of Wolf Haven, their forms shifting between human and wolf as the mood took them. Torches cast flickering light across the assembled faces. The moon hung full and bright overhead, casting silver shadows across the mountains. Elena stood in the center of the gathering, wearing a simple dress that Mira had provided. The mark on her chest was visible through the fabric, glowing softly in the darkness. Kael stood beside her, his hand in hers, his presence a constant anchor. Ronan stepped forward. The Alpha's golden eyes swept across his people before settling on Elena. "We gather tonight to honor courage," he said, "to recognize sacrifice, and to welcome one who has proven herself worthy of our trust." He turned to face Elena directly. "Elena Vance, you came to us as a stranger. You leave tonight as family. You faced our enemies without flinching. You bled for our people. You carried the burden that no one else could carry, and you did not break." He placed his hands on her shoulders. "By the authority vested in me as Alpha of this pack, I name you Luna, protector, guardian, one of us, now and always. Do you accept this honor and the responsibilities that come with it?" Elena thought about everything that had led to this moment, the grief and the loss and the long, lonely years, the impossible circumstances that had brought her to Kael's side, the choice she had made to help a dying creature in the rain. "I accept," she said. A howl went up from the gathered pack, one voice becoming many, rising toward the moon in a song of welcome and celebration. Even in human form, Elena felt the urge to join them, to add her voice to the chorus. So she did. Her howl was human, lacking the supernatural resonance of the shifters around her. But it was real. It was hers. And as it joined with the voices of her new family, she felt something shift in her chest. The mark pulsed brighter. The boundary between worlds seemed to thin, just for a moment, and she caught a glimpse of something vast and ancient and beautiful beyond human comprehension. Then the moment passed, and she was just Elena again. Standing in a clearing in the mountains, surrounded by people who had become her family, holding the hand of the man she loved. It was enough. It was more than enough. Later, when the celebration had wound down and the pack had dispersed to their homes, Elena stood on the outcrop where she and Kael had shared their first kiss. The valley spread out below her, peaceful and quiet in the moonlight. Wolf Haven glittered with the last of the torches, a hidden jewel in the mountains that the outside world would never know existed. Kael joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "You know this is not the end," he said quietly. "Blackwood is dead, but there are others. The war will continue." "I know." "And being Luna, it is not just a title. It is a responsibility. The pack will look to you for guidance, for protection. It will not always be easy." Elena leaned back against him, feeling his warmth, his strength, the steady beat of his heart. "I know that too. And you are not afraid." She thought about the question, about fear and courage and the difference between them. "I am terrified," she admitted. "But I have learned something these past weeks. Fear does not disqualify you from action. It just means you do not know how things will turn out. And not knowing is not the same as not being able to handle it." Kael pressed his lips to her hair. "When did you get so wise?" Elena smiled. "I had a good teacher." They stood together as the moon continued its journey across the sky. Below them, Wolf Haven slept. Around them, the forest hummed with the secret life of creatures who had learned to survive in the spaces between worlds. The boundary held. The balance was restored. And Elena Vance, once a broken woman hiding from her grief in the mountains, had finally found what she had been searching for all along. Not escape. Home. The end.